Excuse me. Good evening, everyone. Tonight is Thursday, May 2nd, 2024, and we are here at the Transportation Commission. My name is Inumi Duna Bikoya, and I am the Transportation Commission staff liaison. This meeting is being recorded, so please turn off your mics if you're on Teams when you're not speaking. Before we start with the agenda items, are there any items or citizen comments on matters that are not on the agenda? If so, please come forward.
Can you hit the button to turn? Awesome, thank you.
Hi, my name is Cody. I'm an 11th grader at Arlington Tech, and I founded a group at my school called the Street Advocate Student Coalition. Our mission is to bring students' voices into the conversation over Arlington's transportation future, advocating for a future in which streets are never hostile to students using any mode of transportation. To explain why I'm here, I want to begin with the story. Last summer, I was investigating the Plan Langston Boulevard initiative as part of an audio journalism story for the Arlington Amp, a student-driven podcast. I was excited for the project. In my mind, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to completely reimagine how a corridor would function for generations to come. But as I walked into an event run by the county to garner feedback from the public, reality hit me in the face. I immediately realized I was one of two people under the age of about 50. The project was totally missing the perspectives of people like me, who are going to have to choose where to live in just a few years. The future of Arlington County, the ones who are going to live for another 50 years, are not present in conversations over what Arlington's future will look like by then. I hope you agree with me that that's a problem. Teenagers often experience cities very differently than adults. For example, most of us here today don't have a driver's license, forcing us to find other ways to get around. We want options to get around without harming the environment because we are the generation that will have to live with those consequences. When our perspectives are excluded from planning discussions, it leaves us with a world unprepared to cater to our needs when we grow up. Young people are growing more aware of transportation issues and much more specific about what we demand from our local governments. The Street Advocate Student Coalition now has over 30 members, and clubs like W&L's Road Safety Club are popping up all over the county. I have met countless young people at this point who, like me, are passionate about these issues and desperately want to have a say in how they will be impacted. But barriers like school and access to information prevent many of us from actually getting involved in planning processes or policy debates. While no one is deliberately excluding young people from these conversations, it's clear to me that the current system for, excuse me, is inadequate at engaging with students. We hope you will seriously consider creating a student committee or pursuing other strategies to increase youth and student engagement in transportation planning decisions.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
Hello, my name is Caleb Kellerman. I'm a junior at Wakefield High School and a member of the student-led advocate group. My interest in this club and activities stem from two experiences which many of my peers hold true. The first is a lack of representation for teenagers in local transit service politics. Many teenagers, like myself, cannot rely on driving as a primary source of movement and are more likely to be seen on buses, trains, or on foot around the county. This makes us a main source of ridership and ridership interest within the area, which I feel as though isn't represented enough, even looking around the room now. The second experience involves inefficient or even dangerous setups around the county. As mentioned before, many of my peers are unable to drive. To negate this problem, many of us walk, and many of the walking setups around the county are simply just not built with walkers, or in this case, teenagers in mind. For instance, on South 4 Mile Run Drive, I've almost been hit 5 times within the last 3 years due to the curve of the street and the ways that the parked cars obstruct the view of oncoming drivers. More input from those forced to walk or ride the bus should be a priority. The occurrences described above inspire a sense of need for change. It is these separate but similar experiences that unite us as a group and allow us to sit before you today and ask for involvement of younger people in decision-making processes within the county, however you see fit. Thank you for listening.
Good evening. I am Lauren Sproles, a sophomore at the Arlington Career Center. For many other students like me, biking is our main source of transportation, as we are legally not allowed to drive yet. I find biking to be the most efficient way for me to get out of my house and commute around Arlington without having to bother my parents for a ride. However, many of the streets of Arlington are not very bike-friendly and can be very stressful and unsafe to ride through. When I bike on roads that don't have bike lanes, I feel very vulnerable and exposed to all the cars that fly by me. I attend a school that I do not live close to, which makes it very hard for me to attend evening school activities, getting to school early to work on projects, or hanging out with friends who live near the school. And walking isn't really an option for me since I live far away, and my parents definitely don't appreciate driving me for a near 40-minute round trip. Biking would be my best option, but unfortunately neither me or my parents feel comfortable with me riding through some of the busy streets of Arlington. This is why I believe that it is important to allow the youth to be more involved in transportation decisions. Transportation is a daily part of our lives, but we have limited resources and are underrepresented. I know there are many other young people who face the same challenges as I, whether it be finding a safe way to get to school, work, or any other activities or errands they do. I hope that in the future, the need for safe commutation for the younger generation is not as overlooked. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for speaking. It's absolutely fantastic to have you here and to have your energy and to have your interest. I think you will find that basically everyone up on this dais agrees with you on pretty much everything that you have said. Affecting change in a system that's been built over decades is something that takes a lot of time and energy. And a lot of us up here have been putting that time and energy in, and we're going to have to pass that baton down to some younger people who are going to keep putting in that time and energy. It is fantastic to have you out here. I highly encourage you. I know some of you, but I don't know if all of you have signed up for Sustainable Mobility for Arlington County's action alert emails or following them on social media. A lot of opportunity there to get involved. And we are about to replan transportation in Arlington kind of from the top to the bottom as we rebuild the master transportation plan. So I, for one, will be looking for an awful lot of your input as we do that. And as we talk about the capital improvement plan, which is coming up over the next few months, which is what are we going to spend our money on, from a concrete and steel perspective for the next 10 years? What streets are we improving and what buildings are we upgrading and all of that sort of stuff. And that's the kind of stuff that's going to last well into your lifespan. So look forward to that conversation, and don't hesitate to come back and yell at us if we're not paying enough attention. And Commissioner Lantelmi would like to add something as well.
What he said, I think all of us agree. You discovered that these are public meetings, that we are open to public comments. And it isn't just Transportation Commission, it's also Planning Commission and all the other commissions and the subcommittee meetings of those commissions. When there's a specific project, there is always at the end of those meetings time for public comments. Even if you're not at the table officially, you still have the opportunity to make comments. All the documents are posted online. I'm pretty sure you guys know how to do that and get through that. The stuff is there. You can read it. Given that you're high school, you can do it. You can read through those things. You can form opinions. Given that you have clubs, you can talk about them. You can send somebody. Doesn't have to be everybody. You could send somebody and say, this is the position that we have. Our opinions on this project are A, B, C, and D. Almost all those projects have a bicycle component. It is always discussed. So exactly the things that you're looking at and you're concerned about are things that we talk about at those meetings. And you have the opportunity to influence that by showing up And it can be either online or in person. We do both, and making comments. So I encourage you to do that. You've taken the first step. Go with it. And your committees that you've created in your schools, bring that back to them and tell them, we want to hear. You have an opportunity to do it and a way to do it.
What's next, Ms. Obukoya?
Okay. First item on the agenda is an update to shared and off-site parking regulations. This is an action items, and we have staff member Valerie Weiner and staff member Mosi London.
Good evening, everyone. Let me share my screen. All right. Does that show up okay for everybody?
Looks good.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So first, I'll just echo the comments already made by Commissioner. That was a great presentation by all of the high schoolers who came, and I think actually flow very well into these items. So I am back to present parking updates to the zoning ordinance as part of the Commercial Market Resiliency Initiative. Again, my name is Val Weiner from Arlington Economic Development, and the following proposals have been put together with input from the Department of Environmental Services and the Planning and Zoning Divisions of Community Planning, Housing, and Development Department, as well as feedback from this group and the Zoning Committee. Mosi London, as was mentioned, one of the county's DES transportation engineers, is also here to help answer questions as well. Also, if you can't already tell, I'm recovering from a cold, so I may need to mute in order to cough, and my apologies for that. So I will go quickly through CMRI and some of the context, since you've all previously heard that, in the existing by right parking regulations, since you heard that last month. And I'll spend the majority of the time on the proposed regulations for on-site shared parking and off-site parking. Again, some of you may have heard a lot of this proposal a couple months ago, but now we'll have quite a bit more detail. So it may sound familiar, but for good reason. So since you've heard about CMRI previously, or Commercial Market Resiliency Initiative, I mainly would like to emphasize that we've been tasked by the county manager and the county board to take big swings, some of which we know we will have to monitor and update as needed, but the overall goal is to try new things that we think will help to support businesses in an unstable market, and then we can make updates based on market reactions. While CMRI has many goals, including balancing the residential and commercial split in the tax base, which lessens the burden on residential taxpayers, these swings relate specifically to CMRI's goals for services and placemaking. These regulations support CMRI's both short and long-term goals for services and placemaking, in that in the short term, the proposed regulations support filling vacant spaces by streamlining existing processes and creating new regulatory processes that help businesses avoid having to minimize GFA or find new locations. In the long term, these proposed regulations are intermediary steps toward rethinking the county's parking regulations as a whole. The value of this for CMRI is minimizing the direct cost of parking for a business or maintaining parking for a business, while also being able to find the highest and best use of parking spaces, which could include new business development. We recognize that there are risks involved with taking these steps toward larger changes, but these risks will also produce data that we can use to inform updates in the future. And in the meantime, the goal is to support a business's ability to provide goods and services that we need in our community. So I believe you've seen this slide before, but for some context, this slide outlines how we currently regulate by right parking in the county, which is by minimums. These minimums have inconsistent measurements, and many haven't been assessed or changed since their establishment decades ago. As mentioned, the impact of this approach is that the minimum requirements can stifle a business's ability to maximize available GFA in a given space or force them to find new space. And I can go back to any of these slides at the end if you would like. So in the case of on-site shared parking, these minimums can be especially mismatched because of how the lots are used. In most cases, the retail strips or strip malls associated with shared lots have a mix of uses that complement each other's hours of operations or hours of peak demand. A medical office versus a restaurant, for example, have different peak demand times, and this shift is not reflected in the county's existing minimums approach. Other jurisdictions around us are moving toward removing minimums entirely. As many of you know, Charlottesville and Richmond have removed minimums throughout their jurisdictions, in part to support commercial enterprise. And Fairfax County has also recently restructured its parking ordinance to move in this direction as well. There is opportunity with shared on-site parking to take an iterative step in that direction by establishing a new path for this type of development with a shared parking lot to be regulated based on usage and not minimums. So there are three components to this piece of the proposal. We are introducing a new use of a neighborhood commercial center, a new parking ratio for that use, and the ability to modify that ratio via use permit. Introducing a new use makes it easier for staff to administer the code for these development types, which are right now undefined. We landed on this definition in order to be as inclusive of as many by right neighborhood commercial centers as possible, while also allowing staff discretion on the extent and the boundaries of the center. So this resulted in just some highlights of the definition, an upper limit of 200,000 square feet, requiring multiple commercial and or retail tenants, as well as highlighting that there is no residential floor area as mixed use projects do not qualify in this case. And per our last presentation to you all, we did not include any sort of height restriction in the definition. This proposal also includes a proposed ratio of 1 per 600 square feet, 1 parking space per 600 square feet of GFA for a neighborhood commercial center. This ratio is progressive. It decreases the parking minimum for something like a general retail or service commercial use by about 2.5. That ratio right now is 1 per 250 GFA, 1 parking space per 250, apologies. Another example of a restaurant will go from being parked at 1 parking space per 6 seats to being regulated as 1 parking space per 600 gross floor area for the entire neighborhood commercial center, not just their singular retail bay. We discussed and tested multiple ratios, and staff found that this ratio is a first step toward testing the market reaction to a more relaxed parking regulation. We did refer to the Institute of Transportation Engineers parking demand data, as well as a small sample of existing neighborhood commercial centers in the county, and both indicated that 1 per 600 is within the range of demand for this development type, as well as a progressive test for some of the existing sites that we have today. We also propose the option to modify this ratio via use permit, excuse me, recognizing that there are some sites with parking ratios that are much less than 1 space per 600 square feet of GFA. So this option includes criteria such as TDM strategies like transit information displays, bike infrastructure, property transportation coordinator, and the most likely option, which would be a shared parking plan that outlines how the demand shifts between uses. As previously mentioned, there are items to monitor with this proposal. For example, we plan to monitor how this approach will work when the neighborhood commercial center is under different ownership, as well as how the ordinance interplays with by right outdoor cafes. These two items in particular are topics that would arise as we move forward with the discussion of removing minimums regardless. So this data on outcomes and impacts of this regulation will be helpful as we continue to work through our future updates. And we are working now with zoning to create a reporting system. So every time they receive an application, we are all, those of us who worked on the front end of it are notified of that application. For offsite parking, as mentioned in the previous meeting I attended with you all, there are limited capacities for a commercial business to pursue offsite parking as it currently stands in the zoning ordinance. Other Virginia jurisdictions offer offsite parking agreements by right or a use permit that includes a parking study. The opportunity here is to expand our existing regulations to offer more opportunities for off-siting parking in order to support filling vacant commercial space and a business's ability to maximize GFA as well as available nearby parking, which then creates the highest and best use of those spaces. We are proposing essentially two paths, a by right and a use permit path. The by right path keeps the existing regulation in that it is by right if the same entity owns the on and off-site spaces, but we propose to expand the distance between the on and off-site spaces from 600 feet to a quarter mile, which is 1,320 feet. I think there was a typo in the posted PowerPoint. Apologies for that. And disallowing off-siting parking for the purpose of by right outdoor cafes. Staff felt that the outdoor cafe component needs to be monitored and addressed separately, just as it will be monitored with on-site shared parking. And then in addition, this path retains the existing safety standards that are currently in the ordinance for a safe distance and path between the on and off-site spaces. There will also be a use permit option for off-site parking where there are two different owners of the on and off-site spaces. The use permit will include the same safety standards as the by right option, while also requiring that all sites be located within Arlington County. This is for enforcement and legal reasons. The same prohibition on off-siting spaces for the purpose of outdoor cafes, a requirement that all off-site parking is more than and/or does not conflict with the parking required for the uses on the off-site property, and the existence of a off-site parking agreement. This agreement is between the business requesting the spaces with approval and sign off from the owner of the actual space and the owner of the off-site spaces. So we list the baseline criteria for that agreement in the proposed language. We took that from neighboring jurisdictions as well as language that already exists in our ordinance for off-site agreements. We've also created a draft template with the county attorney's office that we can share with applicants once it's ready to help them move through the process faster in case they haven't worked with an agreement before. And the review and renewal period for the use permit will allow the opportunity to add additional conditions as needed. With this item, we primarily aim to monitor whether the use permit criteria is too onerous for the business and whether we can streamline that. And then tracking enforcement of the discontinuance of an agreement. And then also how this ordinance interplays with outdoor cafes similar to on-site shared parking. We have hypotheses on staff of what may happen, but we won't know until there are real examples in the county that we can point to. So again, we are aware of the risks, but we are excited about how this information can help the county to continue to support placemaking and services and progressive transportation policy as part of the Commercial Market Resiliency Initiative. And I have a draft motion, so I'm happy to answer any questions. I know that was fast.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate the quick presentation, given that we've been over the kind of underlying idea here and are just getting down to brass tacks finally with actual ordinance language. Are there any commissioners with questions? Commissioner Flores, go ahead.
Oh, I have a different mic. Can y'all hear me? You can. Just to echo what Chris has said so far, you guys have made great strides. It's very obvious from when you were presenting to us before a couple of months ago, Valerie. I have two questions, and I think one of them you might have answered before. And so I'll do that one first. Do we have quantification for the number of spots that this would free up either on average or countywide?
No, but we have it based. We have it based on what the existing requirements are. So, like I was saying, we have right now the parking ratio or the minimum for a general retail and service commercial is 1 per 250. So we know that this would free up 2.5 times less that space. So we can do it based on the minimums. We don't have a database on exactly how much parking it would free up throughout the county.
Okay. Completely understand why not. I know that's a lot of data points. If there comes an opportunity for us to be able to quantify those data points, that is something that I would be interested in. The second one, just given our audience, and I want to make sure I used to be the young Arlington teenager who was biking around. I want to make sure we're making definitions here as they listen to this. Do you mind defining the difference between a by right and an outdoor cafe?
Do you mean the by right and the use permit processes?
Yeah.
Okay. Sure. So the use permit, so when an applicant comes in and applies to open their business in the county, they need to go through many layers of approval. And it depends on, in the zoning ordinance, if it allows them to be approved by right, that means that they can open up in that space under a certain set of conditions without having to go in front of the county board. And then if they require a use permit, which again is determined by the rules set out in the zoning ordinance, they will have to go through a lengthier process that involves working with staff and then submitting sort of a request to the county board that is then approved that way. So it's a lengthier process. And in this case, the reason that we have, like, for example, for off-site parking, we have the by right and the use permit process is when staff feels in this proposal that the by right path is acceptable because it does not have as excessive impact as it would require for the use permit. So in the by right path for offsite parking, that's under the same ownership. So if the same entity owns the on-site and the off-site parking spaces, there isn't an agreement needed because it's the same owner that owns those spaces. It is to their benefit to maintain those spaces and ensure that that parking is signed adequately and all that. If it's two different owners, staff felt like it was necessary to go through the use permit process and require an agreement. So it was clear to the county and recorded in the land records that an agreement exists between two discrete parties. So it's a more onerous process than the by right process, but sometimes it's necessary to ensure that the county accomplishes all that it wants to when approving a business opening in a space. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, that was a great definition. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. So we're defining neighborhood commercial center as up to 200,000 square feet. And we have this existing urban regional shopping center that is 500,000 plus, and we're leaving this like gap in the middle. Are we aware of any shopping centers of that size in Arlington County that we're leaving in this kind of middle limbo?
So we are actually not leaving it in limbo. So we are at the same time in May. Well, let me back up. So for action in May, we are proposing a large media screen ordinance. And as part of that, we are proposing a use that fits that middle space. And I think it is a community shopping center that would be from the 200,000 to the 500,000. So those spaces those developments are Pentagon Center, Crossing Clarendon, West Post, and Village at Shirlington. The urban regional are the Fashion Center and Ballston Quarters. We felt that up to 200,000 covers the by right developments in the county. The community shopping centers and urban regional are either site plan or PDSPs. So this wouldn't necessarily, they go through a different process than the by right development would.
Gotcha. So this would not apply to them. Yeah, and it's interesting to me because they do go through a different process in kind of deciding how many parking spaces we let them build with. But those businesses are still stuck with a minimum parking requirement, despite the fact that they do have shared parking, like West Post has shared parking. Okay. Commissioner Moradovic, I think you had a question.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is a lot of details here, and it's pretty nuanced and a lot of really well thought out stuff. I'm curious, how much time do you think like you and your other colleagues worked on to come up with all of this? Like a rough estimate.
I would say it's been 6 months.
Yeah.
To 8 months. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I like how it's a step in the right direction, but at the same time, it's like, I feel like, and this isn't a criticism of you specifically, Valerie, because but there are so many, like we're creating our own data set, taking this little baby step, creating our own data set as if we exist in like some vacuum when there's so many data sets out there, what the good policies are without having to come up with new things like a neighborhood commercial center and a new zoning. I wish we could just go to the logical conclusion already and streamline the process completely by not having any of these parking minimums. But if this is an intermediary step that needs to be taken for some reason, then so be it. But the fact that you had to have like a several minute explanation of what was a by right cafe, and now it's like kind of indicates how complicated this is when it can be so much simpler. And it's just a burden on business owners. It's a burden on county staff to do all this research when the obvious decision is right in front of us the whole time. So yeah, that's that. Thank you.
Other commissioner questions or comments? Commissioner Lantelmi.
Yeah, I'd like to associate myself with Commissioner Moretta comments there. This is definitely a step in the right direction, and I'll be voting in favor of it. But we really do need to be moving to parking, getting rid of parking minimums and maybe going to parking maximums instead, like other jurisdictions have done. It's been happening for a long time. We have experience with it. We know that it works. We should not take 10 years to get to that outcome. Again, this is a nice step in the right direction, but let's start really moving toward implementing a way that we can get rid of the parking minimums completely. We've seen enough things before us over the past few years. I'm thinking particularly the daycare discussions, where it was mind-boggling to us that we were trying to dictate what the number of spaces should be when those daycare providers know who their clientele are and who their employees are and are completely way more competent than we are to decide what they need for parking to be successful. And they want to be successful. They're not going to sabotage themselves by not doing the right number of parking spaces. So let's please, I'm saying, please, let's move toward getting rid of minimum sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Commissioner Shannon.
Yeah, and just one question for clarity. When you mentioned Richmond, Charlottesville, and Fairfax, are you, and I don't recall, is they removed parking minimums? Is that correct?
Richmond and Charlottesville, not Fairfax. Fairfax, they are they're taking more of a commercial centers approach. So their parking minimums are measured, or they differ depending on what area of the county that you're in. But Richmond and Charlottesville, I believe, got rid of their minimums across the city.
And for Richmond and Charlottesville, did they go through an incremental approach or an all at once approach to the removal of minimums?
Incremental.
And then the last question to that: do you know how long it took through the incremental steps to get to get rid of minimums?
I don't, but I can find out. I don't know exactly, because there's also a lot of work that happens behind the scenes before things even are made public. But I do think as we move forward and look to push this even further, I think having direct conversations with the staff that worked on those policies in those jurisdictions would be helpful to us too. So I think that's definitely something I can find out.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hussain.
Yeah, I just want to agree, and I think that this is great, but it would be nice to kind of, because I think there's a willingness. Like if I was the county manager, I'd be ready right now to get rid of them. But understanding that there's a lot that goes into these things. But yeah, I just want to agree that this is really good, but I would like to see just a little bit faster so that we're not spending the next 15 years creating new terms and zoning laws when we could just not like that, but just so that we do it a little bit faster so that we're not just stumbling.
Great, thank you. I think this is a huge step forward. As someone who opened a business, I think it's underappreciated how much uncertainty there is around parking when you're getting ready to sign a lease that is probably for more money than you have ever agreed to spend in a monthly amount in your entire life. We went to sign our lease for the dance studio at the first time, and its monthly rent was 10 times our parents' mortgage. Was what we were signing away and agreeing to pay. And we were basically taking it on faith that we would be able to get a certificate of occupancy from a parking standpoint, because the only way to know with certainty is to go through every single other business currently in that shopping center, decide with certainty exactly how they've been classified by the county as to what their parking requirement is, which when it comes to a restaurant involves how many tables and seats are in that restaurant. Add all of those numbers up, count every single parking space in the shopping center parking lot, and figure out, are there enough left for my business? That is chilling. It is awful as a business owner, and this makes that go away. in many cases for these shared parking situations. So I will associate myself with my other commissioners who are very much in favor of getting rid of minimums entirely. I am as well, but I think it can be hard to fully grasp how much of a big step forward this is for those who are in a shared parking situation. Commissioner Hussein.
Sorry, really quick. I just this was something that just popped into my head. I had a clarification question. I think you mentioned in your presentation about how before there wasn't a height requirement before, and then now there is.
No.
No, okay.
Sorry. I last time I presented I presented these items in February to this group. And it was at the time, the definition was much more gray than it is now. And we proposed some options, including potentially adding a height limit, like a height maximum as like one floor only. And it was recommended by this group to not add that in, and it is not in there right now. There is no height limit or height requirement, height minimum as part of the definition of this use.
Okay, that makes sense. Sorry, I must have just misheard that when you're yeah, thank you.
It was probably me.
No. I think my brain is not.
Any other
not
commission
right now.
Any other commission questions or comments? All right, then we'll move to a motion. I move that the Transportation Commission recommend that the County Board approve the proposed ordinance to amend, reenact, and recodify the Arlington County Zoning Ordinance, Articles 7, 14, and 18, as outlined in our draft board report.
Second.
That is moved and seconded. Is there any discussion of the motion that is before us on the table?
Yes, just a brief point of question. I'd like to know if it's possible, in addition, I do intend to vote in favor of the overall motion, but I would like to know if it's possible to add in a proposal that we recommend staff to seriously investigate timelines for advancing towards abolishing parking minimums, instituting parking maximums. I see that this is an incremental process, and as indicated earlier, many of the localities surrounding Arlington have taken the incremental approach, but I think we have to be clear-eyed about what our process will look like, and just because other localities around us have taken an incremental approach doesn't mean we necessarily have to. We can learn from their processes, we can interact with their staff, and that can save us time. So I think we need to develop a process that works for us instead of benchmarking ourselves against our surrounding environs.
Someone could certainly move that as an amendment to the motion before us to say something like, furthermore, the commission recommends that staff move forward with urgency to abolish parking minimums across the board, or something like that. Ms. Obakoya, can we get the people list up on the screen? Thankfully, I know what Commissioner Coleman sounds like, but I don't know that I would recognize every single person when they popped up. Thank you. Commissioner Flores.
I would like to echo that, but I would like to enhance the language to communicate that we would like to see a timeline, an established date of when we will be moving towards erasing parking minimums.
Something like the Transportation Commission recommends that the county board direct the county manager to create a timeline for determining when an abolition of parking minimums can come before the county board.
What he said. That's great.
Do you want to actually move that, Commissioner Lantoni?
I move what I just said.
Well, if you'd said I move, I would have written it down.
I took it if you want me to recant.
Hit me.
Oh, you said hit me. I thought you said hold on. The Transportation Commission recommends that the county board direct the county manager for a timeline of when there will be a disestablishment of Parking minimums?
recommendation to the county,
Recommendation.
to the county board for the abolition of parking minimums.
I got most of it.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Sorry, this isn't. Oh, there we go. Would the abolition of parking minimums in consideration be for commercial, residential, all uses? Would it include institutional? For example, if there were like an assisted living center or something of that?
I would say yes, but they could be done at different timelines.
Commissioner Flores.
I would recommend business first.
That makes sense. But we could leave that really up to staff to
Okay.
figure that out.
Yeah, I like to avoid being too prescriptive here. Anybody else want to discuss this motion to amend? Commissioner Moravec.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what the smartest thing would be, because even there's an obvious benefit to businesses first, given our high vacancy rates in the commercial buildings, and how much of a drain that is on our tax base as our budget is increasing and taxes increasing. But like pretty much every residential project that comes here, it's a site plan amendment for lower parking ratios. So it's something that's pretty universal. I don't remember anyone coming here asking for more parking. So
It's been a long time.
yeah, I'm just thinking out loud here right now on what the best language would be without being too prescriptive.
That's why leaving the language as I put it is that it's open. And because as we see, there's pros and cons for all the different various permutations of this.
Would we,
Commissioner Hussain.
yeah, would it make sense for us to also put in parking maximum or just eliminating parking minimums?
That's probably a further step, I would think.
Okay.
But yeah, that would be part of it presumably, but it does not have to be right away, I think.
Okay. That would make sense. I feel like keeping it open makes some sense, and then going forward from there.
Yeah, just adding to that, I'd rather focus on, we trust the business owners to do right by their business. We don't want to be prescriptive in the opposite direction initially if that's not something that's warranted. I think the more important first step is the minimums. The maximums is something that I think we could figure out if that's a problem later, or if that resolves itself, just removing the minimums.
I think we need a second though.
Oh, was it not seconded? I thought it was seconded.
Second.
Oh, there we go. Seconded by Commissioner Shannon. Whew, discussing it without a second. That was a faux pas on my part. Robert would not be happy with me. All right. Any other discussion of the motion to amend that lies before us, which is that adding to the county manager's recommendation that the Transportation Commission recommends that the county board direct this county manager to establish a timeline for the abolition of parking minimums. All right, so we were voting just on this motion to amend the main motion, and then if it succeeds, or I guess even if it fails, we will then have a vote on the main motion, assuming nobody adds another amendment. So on the motion to amend, Commissioner Coleman.
Aye.
Commissioner Flores.
Aye.
Commissioner Furman.
Aye.
Commissioner Hussain.
Aye.
Commissioner Lantelmi.
Aye.
Did Commissioner Locker join us? Yes.
I did aye.
Commissioner Ludlow.
Aye.
Commissioner Moravec.
Aye.
Commissioner Shannon.
Aye.
And I don't see Commissioner Terry online yet. How about Commissioner Theo? I don't see him online yet. So then I also vote yes. And the motion to amend passes 10-0. Is there any discussion now of the motion as amended, which is the county manager's recommendation plus the thing we just voted on? Or any other further motions? Seeing none, we will vote on the motion as amended. As soon as I make space for another motion in the spreadsheet. Commissioner Coleman,
Aye.
Commissioner Flores,
Aye.
Commissioner Furman,
Aye.
Commissioner Hussein,
Aye.
Commissioner Lantelmi,
Aye.
Commissioner Locker,
Aye.
Commissioner Ludlow,
Aye.
Commissioner Moradovic,
Aye.
Commissioner Shannon,
Aye.
and I too will vote yes, passing that 10-0. Thank you very much, Ms. Weiner, and appreciate all your hard work and look forward to more commercial resiliency in the future.
Thank you all. Have a good one.
Take care all.
Next on the agenda, we have the 12th Street Landing TSA site, which is a PDSP, phase development site plan. Is Mr. Whitmore presenting first or Ms. Gabor? Okay, Mr. Whitmore, please take it away.
Thank you, Ms. Obukoya. Brian Pilot from Studios is going to start here. I'm going to hopefully share my screen. There we are. While he's getting up there, I want to echo, if I may, just real quick, what everybody said. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. I know everybody talked about the specifics of the content you guys are participating in, but the fact that you're here at all and participating, that's the only way local government works. It makes me feel really good to see you all doing that. Please keep it up. Thanks. So sorry about that.
Yeah, I would just echo that. It was a really impressive presentation. I think it's going to be a very tough act to follow. My name is Brian Pilot. I'm a partner in Studios Architecture here on behalf of the client. You can move forward. I'm going to give a broader macro view of the project, starting with our guidelines, giving some of the broader context. Then Felice from Grove Slade is going to walk through the transportation section. And then I'm going to come back at the end and talk about the phasing. Move to the next one, the guiding principles. We really started here. It's the Livability 22202 action plan and the Pentagon City Sector Plan. These are really the two documents that are the foundation of our guiding principles. This PDSP proposal is just the next step in a long process that started about 6 years ago and predated the sector plan. The county went through a number of studies that culminated in the adoption of the sector plan, and we are now taking the next step, seeking approval of a PDSP that will provide a framework of implementation of the sector plan goals at the 12th Street Landing site. The next one. Here are our guiding principles, which can be found in our design guidelines. These principles will shape our decision-making in the next phases of the project and stress the importance of everything from multimodal transportation and bicycles to building equitable communities to making nature and biophilia a part of the everyday experience. And the importance of sustainability and resilience is also outlined in our design guidelines, which note the design principles for LEED, as well as compliance with the county's green building policy and energy goals. A few snapshots here of the existing site. The image on the left is a site aerial. We also have photos of the surrounding context. The site is bound by South Hayes, 12th Street, South Fern, and the DEA site to the north. And as we zoom into the site, this is a drawing of the existing conditions. A few items of note are that the existing below-grade garage spans the entire site. So any existing structure or landscape elements, those are currently sitting on top of existing below-grade structure. There's also a natural break point at that existing garage running north-south as that original site was developed, allowing each site to, or each of the halves to almost operate a bit independently. And then we also have the existing metro access easement, which is a key consideration of the project. You can move forward to the concept plan. Looking at that broader urban context, which is illustrated here in this zoomed out aerial. You see our site in the dashed area and the future Penn Place development to the east and the Fashion Center to the west. Some of the key elements from a macro perspective directly from the sector plan at our site, note for a half-acre open space adjacent to the metro, and that continuous green ribbon is noted in those turquoise dots that move diagonally through the site. And you'll see in our macro site plan and our concept plan, as seen here in the next slide, it matches the intent of the sector plan with the open green space at that southwest corner adjacent to the metro and the continuous connector of the green ribbon. On this next slide, you see our proposed development program. The chart in the upper left, this is our density chart. This site really calls for a lot of density. We're almost 1.8 million gross square feet. And I just want to highlight that we are only at the PDSP phase. So what you're seeing on that upper right image, those light gray volumes are not building footprints. Those volumes are only establishing the envelope limits. And how they meet the sector plan's goals for open space and separation along the green ribbon. You can see in the bottom two images, one thing that we learned through the LRPC process and the feedback that we got, the importance of that north-south connection to the interim 11th Street was something that we adapted in our plan. And I'd also note on the bottom two diagrams where you see the darker volumes, they illustrate how building towers could be arranged in two alternate options based on market conditions while still meeting the appropriate design dimensions for tower separation. And then finally, before I hand it off to Felice, our concept plan will meet the 25% tree canopy and vegetation total as outlined in the sector plan.
Thanks, Brian. Good evening, everyone. I'm Felice Brichta with Grove Slade, and I was going to walk through the transportation elements of the project. So as you can see here, just wanted to start with an overall transportation overview. As you all know, it's located in Pentagon City, so it's in an area that's already very well connected, pedestrian and bicycle network, very well connected network for all modes. As Brian mentioned, vehicular parking will be on the site as well as bicycle parking. And then, of course, there'll be a transportation management plan in place in the future. As far as transit facilities, there are a number of bus routes nearby, 10 bus stops within a quarter-mile radius. The site is adjacent to the Pentagon City Metro Station with the existing entrance just across the street, and then a second or an additional entrance will be located on the southwest corner of the block. There's also some planned nearby improvements, including the transitway extension along 12th Street, just to the south of the site. And then focusing on bike facilities, there are already a number of bike lanes in the area, just along South Hayes Street, just to the west of the site, on Southeast Street to the east of the site, multiple capital bike share stations in the proximity of the site, and then a number of planned nearby improvements along South Fern, South Eads, Army Navy to fill some existing gaps in the infrastructure and to enhance connectivity in all directions. And then this slide shows just kind of how the site will fit into the overall future bicycle network. As you can see here, sharrows will be provided in the future along 12th Street. Future protected bike lanes will be provided along Fern Street. 11th Street will provide a future two-way cycle track just north of the site. And then, of course, the green ribbon will provide connectivity through the site, and we'll talk a little bit more about that on some later slides. And so we did want to talk about access to the site. So this slide shows where the proposed parking and service access will be located. As you can see here, interim 11th Street will provide access for both parking and service to the north buildings. The southeast building is a little further away from 11th Street, so parking access will also be provided to that building via 11th Street, but then we are proposing a curb cut on Fern Street for loading, just for loading only for that southeast building. That would be, we'll talk more about that on later slides, but that's envisioned to be a right in, right out access. And the idea behind that loading access there is really to try to avoid some of the things you see here. So things like trucks loading and unloading in the middle of Fern Street, in the on-street parking and the bike lanes, and to provide a location internal to the site for those maneuvers to happen, to avoid disruptions to Fern Street and also minimize any impacts to the bike lane. And then this slide shows kind of a zoomed in version, really kind of showing how we would envision that curb cut. So you can see here, again, as I mentioned, envisioned to be for loading only. It would be right in, right out, and then also head in, head out. So, vehicles would pull head into the loading area, maneuver within the site, and then pull head out back onto Fern Street. And then also, as you can see, the bike lane would extend through the curb cut, but there would be bulb outs and curb extensions on either side of that along Fern Street. And then finally, we wanted to touch a little bit on the green ribbon. This image shows just a conceptual section of the green ribbon. You can see the path and then planting zones on either side. The next slide shows a little bit more about how the green ribbon threads through the site with 3 different character areas, with the public plaza, the green ribbon itself, and then the node up in the northeast corner. And then the next slide shows how the green ribbon could be programmed throughout as it moves throughout the site. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Brian to cover phasing.
So with respect to phasing, we saw this plan before. Once again, the garage extends all the way to the property line, as shown in red, and was originally built in 2 different phases. So there's a natural location to bifurcate the site into 2 sides from a phasing perspective. Next, please. And here you see the manifestation of that. We're calling the land base 701, the larger parcel on the left, and then land base 601 on the right, which can be further phased right along the green ribbon. And here you see how that could evolve here from the existing condition. When land base 701 delivers, that would include the open space as well as all of the streetscape. And then whether 601A or 601B delivered, that whichever phase came first would include that portion of the green ribbon. So that would be in place as part of that second phase. Once again, in all probability, the 701 delivers first, and you see the condition here, and we're trying to be very thoughtful about what that condition would be. There isn't the interim pathway that's provided. It's via the existing pathway through that east parcel. So one would be able to connect through that open space to that node in the upper northeast corner. The public plaza would be in place as part of land base 701. The land base 701 streetscape is in place. A portion of the interim 11th Street is also in place. It's would be important that the existing building that's currently on land base 601 would remain operational. So that existing ramp access that goes down is important to keep in place. Next, please. And here you see an image of that existing parking and loading access, which would be needed for the operational functionality of that land base 601. So now you see the overall program once it's fully built out, the green ribbon in place. The public plaza is in place. The node at the upper northeast is in place. All the streetscape is in place. And the interim 11th Street now connects all the way from to west, and the bike lane is in place on Fern Street. One of the things that we want to reiterate here is that the full width of 11th Street in this interim condition can only be provided with the build out. The full condition can only be provided with the build out of the DEA site to the north. You'll see that that interim condition in the upper right, there's still a generous sidewalk. There's a tree zone, but when the northern parcel eventually gets built out, you see what the ultimate condition would be in the bottom right image. And final slide here regarding the 12th Street Transitway. We recently received the preliminary plans that illustrate 12th Street pushing north into the site, which might require realigning the half-acre park. And we'll continue to work with staff as this plan develops to do what we need to accommodate it. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Joanne Gabor. I am with Arlington County DES, and I'll be doing the staff presentation. I'm going to try and see if I have something to say that hasn't already been said, and if I don't, this will be a really short presentation. Again, this is the PDSP. It is an action item going to the May County Board. Okay, sorry about that. So again, this is an existing site in Pentagon City. There's an existing underground garage footprint that will be reused. We do have 2 garage access points that are located on Hayes Street and Fern Street, approximately mid-block where the future 11th Street will be. We also do have the metro staircase that is located in that southwestern corner, and that will remain in place. It's something that we probably will be looking to see how we can incorporate that into the public plaza to make sure it doesn't end up looking like an impediment and something that we can integrate into it. And again, as mentioned, the transit will be running along 12th Street, and it currently is in the early planning phases. So the development proposal, we do have that half-acre public plaza at that southwest corner, the green ribbon going diagonally through the site, the new interim 11th Street South, that southbound separated bike facility on Fern Street along this frontage. And then again, accommodations with the other improvements that are planned by others, county and private development. The sector plan, Pentagon City sector plan was adopted in February of 2022. And we do have a number of guiding principles that we utilized when we looked at this PDSP. The transportation network, this map here on the shown on the right is from that Pentagon City sector plan. The new portion is going to be circled here in red. This is 11th Street South. Again, it is an interim condition until the property to the north is redeveloped. And we will be looking at, with the phasing, especially how we make sure that the upgrades that are completed make sense from an operational standpoint and functionality standpoint. So that could be looking at 11th Street, looking at some of the signals that exist today, and figuring out how that works based on the phasing. We also do want to minimize those service access points along the main pedestrian network, along arterials, and we are looking to have that along that more alley neighborhood feel street, and in this instance, that's along 11th Street South. Again, this is what you just saw, so I want to just say we are on the same page literally, because this is the same piece of paper you just saw. It is the transitway that we are looking at. Again, we are in those early design phases. And what we did is we wanted to make sure that we basically had the maximum cross section at this point. And so as we go through refinement, we'll be looking at how do we integrate this more into the proposal, depending on who comes first, if it's our project or the developer's project. But rest assured, we're going to make sure that both these projects can move forward in a coordinated process. So talking about the bike network, again, we are going to have bike facilities introduced on Fern Street on the southbound direction along this frontage. The Hayes Street bike facilities are proposed to be on the mall side, so they would not be introduced with this project. There are no bike facilities proposed on 12th Street because that is the transit way. And the 11th Street, again, is with the interim, it probably would be in the travel lanes. And then in the ultimate condition, there would be that bike facility for the individuals that would then connect to Penn Place to the east. The green ribbon does go through the center of the site diagonally. And we also do some sidewalk minimums that we're going to want to maintain. These are reflective of the sector plan guidance around the site. We have 8 feet on 11th and Fern, and then a 10 foot on 12th Street. And all this information is something that when we get to those final site plans, we will do a lot more analysis and in-depth review. But this is the minimums that we're looking at based on our guidance from the MTP and the sector plan. This is excerpts from the sector plan that just shows you what some of the information provided was. This talks about an easement provided on that east side of Fern Street for those bicycle facilities. This is the part of the sector plan that did show street by street just what is proposed and unexpected, excuse me. And what's circled in red is applicable to the site. I'm not going to read this to you all, but suffice it to say it matches what staff's supporting and the applicant is proposing for the minimums. To the phasing, again, one of the challenges I think that's going to come up with the phasing is making sure that depending on what goes first, we do have those transportation improvements in place that make sure that the network is maintained and the site is functional and folks can get to and through the site appropriately. The public review process, we did have 2 LRPC meetings. Currently, we are in the commission meetings. And again, once final site plans are submitted, they would then go through the SPRC and public review process and then eventually county board approval. We are at Transportation Commission tonight. We will be at Planning Commission next Wednesday and then the county board on May 18. And with that, staff does support the project and recommends approval with the attached conditions. And I'm here for any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I participated in LRPC for this PDSP, this phase development site plan, and there's not a lot to say because I think it came to a really good place over time. I really applaud the applicant, who I feel like has been super engaged with kind of everybody involved from early on, and really receptive to feedback, involved in the Pentagon city sector planning process, which I feel like just kind of gets everybody on the same page early on in a very good way. I did want to just ask one more point of clarification on what I feel like was kind of the last lingering point of contention between staff and the applicant there towards the end of PDSP, which is that loading for the southeast building. Staff is now comfortable with the right in, right out on Fern, if that is what needs to happen, or where have we landed on that?
Staff does not, staff discourages loading access points in arterial streets and that impact the pedestrian network. So it's something we will be looking at during final site plan. I wouldn't say it's something staff supports. I'd say it's something staff will be reviewing in the future when we know what the actual program is, the layout, and what the options are to see if we can have loading in other places. Maybe we can do combined loading. A lot of questions, essentially, that we don't have answers for now.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Furman.
On that subject of that specific curb cut, it looked like, at least in the graphics that we were seeing, that there is not a physical barrier on South Fern Street that would prevent left turns both in and out of that. If indeed that area does become a loading bay, is that something that would be within the scope of this project to install something that would prevent those turns in and out of that loading bay?
Absolutely. That's something that we'll look at. And as Ms. Gabor noted, there are a lot of these specifics that are going to have to be nailed down once we know the exact program uses. But I think our message to you all is that we're willing to do whatever it takes here to make this safe and in a fashion that doesn't disrupt the bike and pedestrian network on Fern Street. But that's great advice. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. When talking about phasing, it seemed as though you were indicating the building to the east would probably be the second one to develop in the fact of there being a phasing between the two. Is that currently occupied? And if so, when is it expected to no longer be occupied? Okay, thank you. And then my final question was, it seemed to be indicated on the interim 11th Street South write-up that there would be public parking most close to the curb in that space. If that is indeed the case, I was just going to advocate for using that space for something else, whether it's a one-way bike lane, even just installing barriers to prevent idling vehicles there. That neighborhood has an excessive number of vehicles that stop and wait for folks coming in and out of the metro, making deliveries. I would just recommend that not being parking, but just wanted to throw that out there. Was that in fact designed to be parking as of right now in its interim state?
I will bring my screen up to make sure we're talking about the same thing, but I think you're referencing the 7-foot space labeled parking Pudo. But give me 1 second and I will share our presentation again so we can all be clear.
There.
Here we go.
Yeah, that's correct. That's the one.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So that's currently envisioned as pickup drop-off, right? Yeah. Commissioner Lantelmi.
Yeah, on a totally different topic. The metro entrance on the corner, which is the stairway down to the station, it's part-time right now, and it's not maintained by the applicant. That's now county maintained, or is that WMATA maintained? Who has jurisdiction over it?
So the staircase is maintained by the county. Based on our research, the applicant is the one who sets the operating hours and the hours that you can utilize it. To be honest, it's not something we got into specifics with the applicant. I'll just say from a staff perspective, we probably would hope that would be open more than 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. To provide access for folks when they're not during traditional office hours, but I don't want to put the applicant on the spot right now. And again, it's not something we talked about, but it's something we would like to see open equitable hours based on the usage that we anticipate and want to see going there.
Totally my reaction. So thank you. Once that first building is built, which you're saying that's going to be a residential building,
Most likely.
that would indicate exactly what staff says, that you really need to open it as long as Metro's open. Right now, I understand why I have restricted hours, given that it's office use. Especially now, I imagine there's very few people coming in and out of either of those buildings on that site, so it's okay. But once there are residents there, it really needs to be open when Metro is open, period. I think we should have that reflected somewhere in the documents, that this is what staff's desire is.
For the just clarification, are you thinking for the PDSP or for when we get to the final site plan?
It should probably be somehow indicated in the PDSP that when there's a residential use there, the metro station should be open, stairs should be open.
My only concern with that is that I just don't know what else goes into that decision, if that's a coordination with WMATA. I think it makes logical sense, obviously, that it would be open during, and that the owner would likely want it open for its residents. I just don't know what else goes into it. If it's a site plan condition obligation,
is it that complicated to figure out? Because could we have an answer on Wednesday at Planning Commission?
Sure, I think so. We can absolutely look and try to understand that.
Thank you.
Other commissioner questions or comments? Commissioner Muradovic.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really excited about this project and that the design is being done by such a renowned architecture firm. So I'll look forward to seeing what it turns into. I had just one little specific question. The node, what exactly is that, other than just like a little wider space at the end of the greenway, right? It's
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the node is just kind of meant to be where the green ribbon kind of connects up to the intersection, just where you kind of access the crosswalk over to the east side.
So kind of like an inviting space to funnel people through the greenway.
Yeah, to kind of connect the two.
And I'll just add, it wasn't something specifically shown in the sector plan, but we thought it made a lot of sense to give a landing point on that northeast side of the green ribbon, obviously smaller than the plaza, but to kind of signal your arrival out there to Fern Street.
Yeah, thank you. And I think the Pentagon City Sector Plan is guided by 6 principles, and one of them is to provide safe, inviting transportation choices that make driving unnecessary. And this is going to be a phased plan. There's going to be a lot of construction. And one of the issues that we've had at a lot of other sites is that this criteria was not really met as much, especially for cycling because of access to the construction sites. So I hope that that something can be worked out to allow people to get around, not just on foot, but on bicycles. Given that, as you pointed out, how many capital bike share stations there are in that area, and what's going to be happening on Army Navy Drive, so that, as staff mentioned, the wider network can be maintained while this site is being developed.
Any other commissioner questions or comments? All right, then I will move that the Transportation Commission recommends that the county board adopt the ordinance for a phased development site plan amendment to amend the Pentagon City phased development site plan as outlined in our draft board report.
I'll second.
That's been seconded. Is there any discussion of the motion? Hearing none, we will move to a vote. Oh, wait, let me look online. I always forget to look online. Okay, nobody online. We'll move to a vote then. Commissioner Coleman.
Aye.
Commissioner Flores.
Aye.
Commissioner Furman.
Aye.
Commissioner Hussein.
Aye.
Commissioner Lantelmi.
Aye.
Commissioner Locker.
Aye.
Commissioner Ludlow.
Aye.
Commissioner Maradovic.
Aye.
Commissioner Shannon.
Aye.
Commissioner Terry.
Aye.
Is Commissioner Theo joined? Nope. Then I also vote yes, and that passes unanimously, 11-0. It's like it's a great project or something. Look forward to seeing you in the SPRC, and wish you all the best in final design.
The next two items are with staff member Dan Maluf, and the first one is an application to US DOT for Safe Streets and Roads for All grant.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll be your tour guide for the next couple of items. I'm asking for official Transportation Commission endorsement to the county board for submittal of 2 federal grant programs. We'll take them one at a time. First one is Safe Streets for All. This is the federal funding program through IAJA. We've briefed you on it before. Some of you know more about it than we do. So I'm not going to belabor all of the program details unless someone would really like me to. Suffice it to say, this is a very intriguing grant program. We've applied for it before. Project submissions are due May 16th to USDOT. Last year, when I was here, you may recall we applied for the Washington Boulevard Arlington Boulevard interchange project. This was and still is the highest crash location in the county year over year. The project would have addressed huge safety needs, was about the right size in terms of request amount, and was already being federalized. So it was we felt it was a really good match for the program. I have good news and bad news about that application from last year that you endorsed at the time. The bad news is it was not funded, sadly. The good news is it scored very, very well. It received a highly recommended rating from USDOT. Commissioner Terry provided some very helpful resources last year that for sure helped us craft a strong application. In a debrief with USDOT staff, they were very complimentary of the application, identified no major flaws, but they did give us a few small areas of improvement, including better coordination with VDOT and being closer to ready for construction. Would have helped our score a little bit more. So this project is still a big need. We're pretty confident that it will score well again. And we've been doing coordination with VDOT all year, making it closer to being ready. So we would just like to submit the same thing again with some tweaks to reflect ongoing work with VDOT over the past year, including some tweaks to the design, including some updated numbers, data, etc. But the fundamentals of this are still the same as they were last year. We still think it's a good fit. It's still a big need. We don't super want to overthink it. We'd like to just put the same submission in again, updated as appropriate, of course. With that, I would really love to take questions.
Thank you very much. When is the application deadline for this?
Yeah, good question. May 16th. It's coming up. If you are noticing your calendar, that is before the county board meeting. So for this application, our understanding is that doesn't actually have to be included in the application. We need it for our own purposes. And of course, we don't want to submit something that the board wouldn't authorize. But the timing, we don't think the federal rules it's actually a problem.
Cool. I was mainly asking, our board report has a sentence that the VDOT project pipeline study is expected to have selected a preferred study alternative before the application deadline. And I haven't heard a peep out of that pipeline study in quite some time. Is that still an accurate sentence?
Let me check my notes that I received from the project manager this morning. If I could get Teams to work the way that I want it to. She says there will be opportunities for the public to see preferred designs later this year. So we'll have enough of an alternative to submit an application. How much it's refined is it probably won't be a full complete design. Will we have an exact alternative selected? Boy, I wish the project manager were here. That's best I can say. I'm sorry.
Totally understand. No problem. Other commissioner questions or comments? Commissioner Flores.
Can you share how we're quantifying and shaping how our coordination with VDOT has increased in the grant application? Just trying to understand our competitiveness.
Yeah. So basically, we've had this pipeline study that was just referenced going on, and so whereas a year ago the project that we submitted was defined by the county, designed to the extent that it had been by the county, and was wholly a county project. At this point, we've had this pipeline study that's managed through a consultant that VDOT brought on board, so it's much more of a collaborative approach. And a much more refined design with VDOT input from well, I can't say from beginning to end because we started last year without it, but with much more integrated VDOT input.
Okay. I'm trying to phrase my question. So if we are having the discrepancy with when the pipeline study finalizes, how are we showing that we're not in the same place we were last year?
Okay, good question. So we can include that the pipeline study has been going on. We can include that VDOT has had a lot of input into the alternatives that are in the pipeline study. We can none of that were things that we could say last year.
Okay. As someone who does energy grants in my day job, just want to encourage that in as much communication as possible to differentiate ourselves from the application last year. Not a different project, right? But more competitive communication in terms of the progress that has been made.
Indeed.
Great. Commissioner Terry.
Hey, thank you. And glad to see that Arlington's going to pursue this again. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions here. You mentioned it's the highest crash area in the county. What type of crashes are those?
That's a good question. You mean, are they? I mean, most of them are
Property damage,
yeah, most of them are property
fatalities.
damage crashes. I think there's been a fatality there, but it's not a lot of it's mostly property damage crashes.
Okay. One of the things that is really guiding the USDOT right now is the National Roadway Safety Strategy, which is organized around the safe system approach. And Dan, I know you sent me some other documents. I just, I know that they are really looking for anything that will underscore their work in this area. And I don't know how much we're actually talking about the 5 elements there of that safe system approach in the application, but to the extent I think that you can, it'll better align with what this DOT is trying to accomplish. And if you, I do recommend too, if you haven't had a chance to look at it, they've got a nice write-up of the implementation grant winners where it goes over the programs, and there are some key points that are made, such as how the projects are going to serve alternative forms of transportation, people who need ADA access, for example, how the projects are going to be able to support underserved community members as well are called out in a lot of these write-ups for successful projects that are funded. So I would recommend that the county take a look at that and see if there are some elements from that that are things that this DOT is highlighting. And it seems to me they're going to highlight the things that they want to see in the other applications as well. Does do all those comments and feedback make sense to you?
Yes, you can probably see I'm typing them as we go. That is really helpful. I'm sure you recall last year, whenever it was, we had a conversation about this, and you did want to ensure that we were looking into the safe systems approach and making sure that we were responding to those questions, and that is something that we did to a greater extent because of your comments. So I think that was and continues to be helpful to have your wisdom. Thank you.
I don't know how wise it is, but yeah, I just do think though that the safe system approach, I mean, that is talked about by this DOT on a very regular basis up to the secretary. And if we want to be aligning with what their priorities are, that would be good. And then also, I think just if we haven't already, to try to get support from Congressman Beyer and or the senators on this application could be helpful. It can't hurt.
We can make a request for that for sure, and that's instructive to hear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hussein?
Just a quick, words of encouragement. I just hope this goes well, because that's not a great place to drive. And so seeing that kind of improvement would be nice. So I hope this goes well, and I hope our friends at DOT also see that.
All right, seeing no other commissioner hands up, I too will say I really hope we get this grant, because I bike through here every time I come to Transportation Commission or any other meeting at the county, and trails and on-ramps. It's not a great mix. So with that said, I will move that the Transportation Commission recommend that the county board adopt the resolution authorizing Arlington County's participation in the USDOT SS for a grant program as outlined in our draft board report.
Second.
And that is seconded by Commissioner Furman. Any discussion of the motion? Then seeing none, we will vote. Commissioner Coleman?
Aye.
Commissioner Flores?
Aye.
Commissioner Furman?
Aye.
Commissioner Hussein? Commissioner Lantomi? Aye. Did I see Commissioner Walker had to drop off? I think I saw that go by. Commissioner Ludlow?
Aye.
Commissioner Maradovic?
Aye.
Commissioner Shannon?
Aye.
Commissioner Terry?
Aye.
And I will also vote yes, so that passes 10-0. And we can talk about the next grant.
All right, very good, thank you. The next one is the Active Transportation Infrastructure Investment Program, which we and lots of other people are acronymizing to ATIIP. This is the a new federal grant program through IIJA for essentially, in a nutshell, building bicycle, pedestrian, and micromobility infrastructure. That makes it somewhat similar to the transportation alternatives program that you may be familiar with, but whereas transportation alternatives TAP funds flow to states and metropolitan areas by formula, and then we apply for them to states and metropolitan areas. ATIIP is handled directly by the federal government, by USDOT. The amounts of money available are also different. So they have two categories of grants you can apply for through this program. One of them is for planning and design for, bike ped infrastructure, up to $2 million. The other category is for construction of bike ped infrastructure. And what we're hearing is submissions for construction need to be exactly $15 million. They are a minimum of $15 million, and there's the amount of money available, which isn't actually all that much nationwide. They are suggesting that nothing higher than that will be approved. So applications for this are due June 17th. We have a little bit more time before these are due. Like most federal grants, these would be an 80-20 match, where the county would have to put up 20% of the funding. We don't exactly know what to expect from it. This is a new program to us, but we do want to give it a try and see how it goes. We certainly have a lot of needs in this category. So what we're looking for. Last year, I'm sure you don't recall, but last year when we applied for SS4A, I told you that by the time this year rolled around, we hoped to have some George Mason Drive projects ready for application. Good news, we do. The George Mason Drive multimodal study that I think TC was briefed on probably 2023, probably last year, recommended redoing the street, adding a off-street bikeway, as you presumably recall. Staff has started working on 3 segments for a capital project to carry that concept forward. The design for segment 1, which would be north of Columbia Pike along George Mason Boat Drive, is expected to be funded independently. But segments 2 and 3, south of Columbia Pike to Dinwiddie Street and the county line, still need design funding, including the potential Peanut About intersection with 4 Mile Run. I think you should all be familiar with that from the briefing, but if you're not, I'll be happy to do my best. But that would be, a roundabout roughly in the shape of a peanut at the intersection of 4 Mile Run and George Mason Drive. So we'd like to advance that design. The costs for that are right about $2 million. So, sort of exactly in line with the program. So, that's pretty much what we'd like to do, what we'd like to apply for. $2 million to design George Mason Drive segments 2 and 3, south of Columbia Pike, including the 4 Mile Run intersection. And again, that's kind of all I have. I would be delighted to take your questions.
Commissioner Furman, go ahead.
As someone who lives 2 blocks away from segment 3 of South George Mason, I very much am in support of this. I'll echo what the Wakefield student Caleb Kellerman said earlier. 4 Mile Run Drive is an absolute abomination of an intersection where it meets George Mason. And we need to do everything we can to redesign that immediately and move forward with haste to create a dedicated bike area off of the road to connect with so many of the great trails that we have in this part of the county, but that are unfortunately really orphaned from being able to go north and south in any sort of meaningful way. So I very much am in support of this. Don't really have any questions, just wanted to voice that I am enthusiastically a yes.
Anybody else?
Just wanted to also voice my support as somebody who rides the Arlington Loop periodically. That is possibly the diciest place on the whole thing. So, and as somebody who periodically even drives through that area, it's also not intuitively easy. So full support.
Commissioner Lantami?
Same here. I bike through it many times and it never gets better and it never gets easier. It's just a horror. So I'm enthusiastically in support of moving ahead with this.
I will also throw my 25 cents in as enthusiastically supportive of this George Mason Drive project. This was one of the biggest things we heard when we were redoing the bicycle element of the master transportation plan is that we have terrible facilities for moving north-south through the county, not in a car. And George Mason was kind of where we landed as our best opportunity to make that kind of connectivity. You know, just think we've got, you know, Wilson Boulevard going east-west. We got Washington Boulevard going east-west. We got the Arlington Boulevard Trail going east-west. We just don't have any. We have the Custis Trail going east-west. Nothing to just bring north and south together. So I really look forward to this. Commissioner Flores, I see your hand up in the air.
Similar question to last time, but acknowledging that this is our first time applying for this grant, how are we ensuring competitiveness?
Well, we'll do our best to respond to everything that we see in the NOFO. We've taken part in a couple of webinars that have been available to sort of train potential applicants. That was where we heard some of the information about, well, don't apply for anything over $15 million. The money's not there, things like that. So, you know, our typical strategy is to find a project that fits the criteria best that we need, and then try and not leave anything out. Respond to every criteria as best we can. In this case, you know, there's pretty extensive criteria, as there are with all federal grants. You know, some of our grants are really easy. Not all of them are. This, you know, federal grants are a little bit harder just because they list a lot of criteria, but that's also really helpful because then that gives us an instruction book for how to respond. So our concern with this project is not that it won't be competitive. We do think it'll be pretty competitive, with the caveat that this is our first try. Our concern with this source is just that it's not a whole lot of money nationwide, and there probably will be a lot of people asking for it. So we would expect it to be highly competitive.
That really does answer my question. Yeah, just to kind of echo what you're saying, exactly anything we can do to ensure the competitiveness. I think you have heard vocalized support for creating more safer space in that area. But yeah, just want to ensure competitiveness in any possible way, whether it's the shift in the cost share. I know I've seen success in that. If we can alter the cost share to have a higher cost share and ask for less funding, or increase the overall project budget and put more in by adding more things to the project. I've seen success in that from Department of Energy and USDA when I've done grant applications there. So just a suggestion.
I'm thinking about what could we apply for the whole all three segments, since the first segment. Anyway, we'll think about that. That's a helpful suggestion.
Okay.
Anybody else? Commissioner Radovic.
Yeah, maybe something that might help with the competitiveness is from what so this section covers Glebe to Dinwiddie, meaning it covers also Wakefield School. And in the county documentation here, I don't see like the school being mentioned at all. And I think that's a huge value add. And it goes to how we started off this session today about giving people that don't drive a safe way to move around the county. And if people could safely bike from the Barcroft Apartments, where a lot of people live, to their high school, that would be, I think, a strong selling point.
Richard Flores.
To expand on that, reading through the NOFO, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but the component on page 26 where they dictate that applicants should provide a history of transportation planning in the project area, they jump down into public involvement, maybe shown through community benefits agreements. In many of the DOE grant NOFOs that are coming out now, there is a full-fledged requirement for a community benefits plan. I'm not seeing that here too much, but if it might increase the competitiveness to work with Wakefield to either develop a portion of the curriculum to go over how we utilize multimodal transportation specific to Arlington itself, or alternatively utilize just spitballing here, but advisory board of appointed students who might be able to take part in it. I think that would significantly increase the competitiveness of the application.
That's a really helpful suggestion. Those are not things that I had thought of personally. I'm going to take this back as a thing for us to talk about. I'm not sure that I can commit to doing that in the next before this is due, but for sure that's something that I'm marking down to follow up about.
Sounds good.
Anybody else? The go of the order? All right. I move that the Transportation Commission recommend that the county board adopt the resolution authorizing Arlington County's participation in the USDOT ATIIP program as outlined in our draft board report.
Second.
Any discussion of the motion? I feel like we've already done that. All right, then we will move to a vote. Commissioner Coleman.
Aye.
Commissioner Flores.
Aye.
Commissioner Furman.
Aye.
Commissioner Hussein.
Aye.
Commissioner Lantelme.
Aye.
Commissioner Ludlow.
Aye.
Commissioner Maradovic.
Aye.
Commissioner Shannon.
Aye.
Commissioner Terry.
Aye.
And I will also vote yes, and that will pass also unanimously 10-0. Thank you very much, Mr. Maliff. Good to see you and your excellent virtual background once again.
Oh, wrong way. Does anyone know the city? It's not Arlington, sadly.
San Francisco?
It is, yes. Market Street, San
Market
Francisco.
Street.
Well done. All right. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dan. And that concludes the agenda for the evening. Now we're on to other business.
There was a meeting last night that I missed, unfortunately, but I got some of the report out of a bunch of commission chairs talking about potential changes coming down the pike, including recently adopted legislature here in Virginia governing electronic meeting participation. So more to come on that as Commissioner Maradovic takes over, because it starts July 1, and as we get a little more clarity from the county. But I will warn you, it includes a requirement that you be on camera participating virtually. So basically, if you can't be seen on Teams, you will be considered not in the meeting, and some other changes. We'll need to adopt a participation policy annually, not just once, and a few other things like that. Nothing super big. I think we may revisit our charter a little bit to bring it in compliance, and compliance is not the right word, consistency with other commission charters. Hopefully that won't mean giving up our July to June chairmanship, because I think it's better and everybody else should do like we do and not like they do, because their way is dumb. New chairmanship on Jan 1 when you also have a bunch of new county board members.
And you're on the record.
And yes, I know. I will happily say this publicly. January to December chairmanships is silly. Commissioner Flores, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I've got a quick update. Well, I have a question and then an update. Is there any update to the pedestrian access committee requiring a whole new slew of me filling out many forms and then seeing you shake your head no?
They have not come my way yet. And I did follow up and copied you, so
Yeah,
when you get it, I'll get it probably.
I saw the follow-up. I was hoping maybe they just replied instead of replied all, and that they did reach out to you, but
Oh, yeah, no.
no. Okay. Just a quick update on the CCPC meeting, our commission. I went to my first meeting last month and got talked into co-chairing a subcommittee on the green ribbon. And so we are talking about branding and seeing how we can unify the green ribbon in Crystal City. So if anyone has any feedback, thoughts, ideas, feel free to let me know. It was kind of cool to see the presentation incorporate that, but now we're trying to see how we piece it all together in a cohesive brand, marketing.
Julio. Anything else, Commissioner Furman?
I just wanted to bring up the idea of seeing the participation from the high school students at the start of the meeting. I wanted to check, is there anything that prevents someone of any age of joining a commission?
So I thought there wasn't. And then I read the updated advisory group handbook that just went around in the draft, and apparently it does indicate that you have to be 18 in order to participate as a commissioner, in the handbook at least. But I think since this handbook is in draft format right now is exactly the kind of time to be like, is this something that should be a requirement, or is 16 a better age, or something like that?
Follow up on that and see what we can do, because I was very impressed as well with the presentations that you all gave tonight.
Yep. And I mean, we had a college student who was, of course, over 18, but still, that was a very useful participant from Marymount University for a while. So
and we still have that vacancy too, so perhaps we can see what we can do.
Reach out to Marymount too. Cool.
Yeah,
I would say 13 instead of 16.
What was that?
I would say 13 instead of 16. The ones that presented here, they can't drive. They're under 16, but I think their input would be incredibly valuable.
Makes sense. Commissioner Hussein?
Is there another, like, besides just involvement with the commissions, are there other strategies already in place that the county does, just in terms of like student engagement when it comes to transportation issues? Because I just, the first thing that comes to my head is like, do we have like transportation safety conversations at schools? I'm sure, I don't know if we do. I don't know if that's already in place, but I think things like that would be.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Okay.
I think it only exists in nonprofits that just happen to show up for, it like safety with 2 S's will go to certain schools and give briefings, but they don't have the bandwidth or funding to do that throughout APS.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Because
I can say though that Vision Zero is working with these organizations on some feedback, and you all are collaborating, from what I understand, with one of our planners on some other events. So perhaps that's a good start to something that could potentially be good.
Yeah, it's pretty new. It's pretty new here in the county. And like APS just needs to do more of it. Like, I hate to like throw a rock over the wall at the other organization. But I think it's depressing if I don't know if anybody else has read the survey form for the APS strategic plan, right? They're getting all of this, public input about, their strategy for schools. And you couldn't find the word transportation, walk, bike, bus, like anything related about getting kids to and from school anywhere in the strategic plan survey. Go ahead, man.
We have my club, the Arlington Road Safety Club at Washington Liberty, has worked with the Vision Zero team and Christine Baker. We recently held a pop-up in the main cafeteria of our school to kind of raise awareness for road safety. They were collecting student input about transportation issues for students in the county. But there isn't really anything curriculum-wise. There is the driver's education class, which is mandated by the state of Virginia, but that doesn't have too much motorized safety content at all for the most part. So yeah, definitely.
And I also understand that you all participated in the teen job fair event or some teen fair event.
So I know Cody, who is the founder of the Career Center Street Advocacy Coalition, was there. I wasn't.
Okay.
So you have to reach out to him, or I can reach out to him for more stuff on that, but nothing.
Thank you.
Can you give Cody my email address, since I know you have it?
Yeah, of course.
Thanks. Commissioner Moravec.
Yeah, one thing I didn't mention at the beginning of the meeting. I think the biggest opportunity is with the upcoming MTP, the Master Transportation Plan, because that is the strategic document that we refer to And so when that becomes available for public comment, I think that's your biggest opportunity to make an impact by stating your priorities and going on the record with that, because that'll determine what happens for, I don't know, in some cases decades. But I mean, they update the elements yearly. I think they're moving away from the element plan, like the individual elements, to something more comprehensive. But in any case, like strategic documents drive policy, and if you can get your priorities in a strategic document, then you set yourself up for all of the little battles down the road.
Absolutely. Anything else for the good of the order?
Our next meeting is May 30th.
What was that date again?
May 30th.
May 30th.
Oh, and a quick administrative piece on meeting dates. I believe the website still is showing October 31st for the October meeting. I just wanted to call that out because I think we officially motioned on that and passed that.
I need to update that. And I do have one other thing that one commissioner brought up, which was the time of the meetings that we have planned. Can we discuss how many agenda items are the time limits to the meetings, or any other suggestions that you all have for how we structure the format of the meetings? I'm open to feedback.
Yeah, Commissioner Coleman, that was your feedback. You wanna speak some more to that?
Yeah, just a brief point. I just think it would be helpful, perhaps in at least my experience, to have more structure to how our presenters bring the information. We often go in a very free-willing manner, and that's useful for getting all the information that we may individually want from our presenters. But I think it helps kind of guide our conversations from the presenter's perspective, that they bring forward a very concise and well thought out presentation on accordance to a some sort of time limit, and what that can be decided right by the group. I don't have a number in mind, but just something to consider, so it helps expedite some of our points of order, as well as getting through any of our concerns maybe more fluidly, so we don't have to go through the process of asking something that really should have been brought up during the presentation. I know, for example, through a lot of the recent points on the grant funding, I think Commissioner Flores raised a handful of incredibly insightful points that frankly should have been considered from the applicant's point of view, I think. And so I think we're maybe a bit more critical in how we use our time. We can be more efficient.
To speak on that just a moment, when it comes to a grant development process, even though we've got a very short deadline, there's still enough time for them to take back the feedback. I felt comfortable with where we were at when we left that conversation. I think we instilled for the first application the importance, just to put it lightly, with the administration's Justice 40 goals across the board. Arlington does not have as many disadvantaged zip codes, and as such, we are seeing competitiveness rise with grant applications. So I feel like our conversation was pretty successful, and kind of have felt that generally, but definitely see what your point is, Commissioner Coleman, with regards to having a little more structure. I think one thing that would be beneficial is to possibly have maybe more than one stakeholder in situations like this.
Yeah, it has been an ongoing problem, is maybe too strong of a word, but an ongoing source of friction, that we get grant applications without a staffer who knows the project that is being applied for. Is probably something we want to look at in the future, to try to solve, which I'm sure is just 100% staffing, a staffing problem to solve. But it is often the case where it is hard to say, yes, we think this grant should go forward, or no, we don't think it should, without being able to ask a bit more specificity about the project in hand, which there's no, the staffer who's in charge of writing grants isn't necessarily in charge of knowing this project deeply in and out. Go ahead, Commissioner Flores.
I will say there seems to be a different sort of conversation when we do have a presentation that has just generally more than one person working on the same project. I think you could look at tonight, for example, and look at the plan. They had 4 people all together, and then we had presentations that were just one singular presenter, and there was definite difference in the conversation that could be had. Quite frankly, it's probably intimidating to have 8 of us in person and 3 of us online and 1 of you. So maybe we could make a recommendation that if you're going to come before the commission, we would recommend that you bring yourself and another stakeholder.
I feel like it also has, you got to remember every one of those people is paid. And development in this county is very expensive. So I think there is also a need to be sensitive to that, but it is a useful recommendation if it's not our requirement. Do we feel like presentations are too long, too short, about right, or a mix? Commissioner Furman first.
I would just say, I think that oftentimes we get a presentation from, the developer, and then we get the staff presentation. I thought tonight that was excellent because that was condensed. Sometimes I'm not certain we get that. It's oftentimes the staff still wants to go through what their full presentation was, even if it is somewhat redundant with what we just listened to. I think usually it hits the mark in terms of like one presentation to the next, but there's probably some redundancies between the two. So at least my 2 cents.
Commissioner Flores?
Just absolutely echoing that. I think we either run into a situation where we will have one party present and then staff present, and staff will either completely go through it all over again, or staff will go, I have nothing, they did everything. So I think just general communicating effectiveness and efficiency might be the best recommendation here.
I feel like I heard some comments from over here. Nope. Okay. Yeah. So I think there is a lot to be said for making it clear to DES staff that if the applicant has communicated all of the important information, they don't need to feel like they need to say it again. And I do think we need to be consistently telling the presenters on the applicant side that this is Transportation Commission, not Planning Commission. And so to feel free to go light on the architecture talk and some of the other things that are not particularly transportation related, because some of them are very good at like skipping over some of those details, and some of them, start talking about facade defenestration or something, and then I fall asleep. Are there any other pieces of concrete feedback we think we can give to optimize our meeting time here? Commissioner Flores?
I would almost recommend we put our heads together outside of the commission meetings and create a one sheet of outlines to help facilitate what we need to hear. It's not going to be effective across the board, but I think it could drill in the point very professionally of, we're not Planning Commission. We do care about these things.
Yeah, and we could get some stuff in there that we often have to ask about because it doesn't get brought up by default. Like, how many doors do I have to hold open to get my bike into the bike room? Cool. Anything else? Commissioner Hussain?
Yeah, I think like today's presentation where they had a specific transportation like section. Like I thought that was nice because it meant that they were catering specifically towards this group, and I thought that was it just made the presentation a lot easier to follow, and it kind of naturally filtered out all of the non-transportation conversations that could have come up. So it's something like that, like some
Yeah.
kind of.
I think the goal is to get everybody's presentation up to that level, because that presentation was that level because like this is all Ket does. But not everybody has that land use lawyer. Cool. I think that, oh, hey, Commissioner Muradovic, are you going to be around on May 30th?
Yes.
Cool. Can you run the meeting? Because I'm not going to be here.
Yes.
Awesome. Anything else for the good of the order? We are adjourned.
Well, real quick,
No?
you want me to take that on as an action item to start drafting? I can start drafting. Great. This is how I got into the subcommittee, guys. It really was my fault.
Justin, did you see it on the TC calendar or where did you see? Oh, on the new, on the on-base agenda? Oh, okay, okay. Thank you, guys. See you in a few weeks.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, they all come up really quickly.
Yeah.
Auto change. Oh, I didn't mention that I changed my name, did I? I mentioned it at the next one. I didn't mention that I changed my name. In the email, okay, okay, okay. Oh, okay, okay, well, we're good then. Uh, you guys did a great job. I know you, but you took pictures. How about that? And video.
Oh, nice to meet you.
Yeah, it was. It's a new me doing. Be quiet. Yeah, and my information is on the website if you want to reach out for anything. I know a lot of people have probably told you to reach out, but you feel free to follow up, ask me questions, all of you.
Thank you. Get your name down real quick.
Okay. And it's on the website too. You're welcome. All right, yeah. And are you on the email that Cody, you are? I think Cody sent an email to Christine. He copied me. So my email address is there. Did he send you, were you copied on the email today? I think it was, he said Alex and Caleb were coming today. I don't know if he put your email.
I don't think he CC'd me in the reply.
Oh, okay. Okay, all right.
Anyway,
Okay.
thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very excited. We'll work something out.
Thank you.
Okay.
Me too.
Wise can be a bit much, you know? How do we turn off the timer from here? Is there a button, a switch?
No, it's probably not to.